Most people have experienced bad times. Sometimes they last an hour, other times full days, maybe even a month or a year. I'm guessing that on at least one occasion, though, you felt like your life has been out of your control, or like you had no say in what's going on. Maybe you've even been put into a tough situation where someone seriously wronged you and you feel like you're owed something as a result. A lot of us have also experienced that feeling of anger to the point where we're almost possessed by something else. And after it subsides, we look back and we're almost embarrassed at how we reacted or lashed out and got carried away. And still others, or all of us, have experienced sadness to the point where we feel like there's no hope, no point in trying to change our circumstances, and we feel like we just want to be stuck in bed all day. These are really just part of the human experience. And today we're going to be going over the one thing in your life that's going to not only remove those feelings, but also put you back in control for success in your life, for your business, and the other factors of your life. Because here's the thing, all of those emotions and the consequences that come from them stem from one overall condition. It's a lack of personal accountability or ownership every element of your life. And when I was first exposed to this idea, I didn't really understand or accept it completely. At the time, I was 19 years old. I was serving a 2-year mission for my church in Phoenix, Arizona. For context, the way missions function in my faith is that there's a geographic area that you're assigned to, typically for 2 years. And over that area, there's a husband and wife couple called as mission leaders. And they preside over that geographic area for 3 years. So every 3 years, the mission president and his wife rotate out and somebody else fills that role. And that transition period can be a little interesting at times for both the mission president and for the young missionaries that are serving. Now, I was lucky enough to basically come into the mission field at the same time as my mission president. He got there on July 1st and I got into the field on July 27th. So I really didn't know anything different other than the way, just how he was operating things. And to me, first impression, he was an amazing person. And he really was. A former global vice president of Procter & Gamble, just a spiritual giant. And he also had a level of self-confidence and self-assurance that I really admired, especially as a 19-year-old. I was actually pretty intimidated by him when I first met him. But long story short, when I got into the field, I quickly realized he was changing things from the way that the prior mission president had operated. The last mission president was pretty relaxed and easygoing, but President Beck, both because of his drive and personality, had very high standards for excellence performance. And as a result, he was making a lot of adjustments and there were mixed reactions across the mission. At the time, there were more than 150 missionaries, if I remember right, and all of those missionaries were handling the adjustments in their own way. And like so many other areas of life, people are resistant to change. It's natural for all of us to want to maintain the status quo. And so with President Beck's adjustments, there were different responses ranging the spectrum. Some missionaries were very teachable and willing to do whatever it took to be an effective missionary. And then there were others that had their own personal agendas. And so the responses on an individual basis ranged from complete acceptance and eagerness to the other extreme of disregard and flagrant refusal to accept the changes. And then there were those of us who were so new to the entire experience, we didn't even know what to expect in the first place. And that was kind of where I was. I felt more like a freshman trying to find his role on the basketball team. And I remember at my very first zone conference where we all met together, President Beck was very direct in addressing these different attitudes and opinions to the way that he was running things. He made it very clear that these adjustments were just the beginning, but more importantly, that he was not looking at the short term, but really trying to set us up for success throughout the rest of our terms of service, and that he had our best interests in mind rather than anyone else's short-sighted interests. And he made it very clear that these standards were here to stay and they weren't going anywhere. And to help us with these adjustments, he gave us a strategy that would help us to accomplish some incredible things during our term. And it was some of the best advice I could have ever possibly received in my life, even if it really took years for it to sink in. But what he did was he drew 2 circles and they overlapped each other, where you had one large circle and then inside a much smaller circle. And he labeled the inner circle as the circle of control. And then the outer circle he referred to as the circle of concern. And what he told us was that the total area of these 2 circles was fixed. The outer circle was not getting any bigger or smaller, but that the circle of control would expand and contract depending on where our focus was. And he said that the more we focused on things that were outside outside of our control. It would reduce the amount of control we actually had rather than trying to expand it. But the more we focused on our circle of direct control, things like our attitude and day-to-day actions that we had full and just complete control over, the more that circle would expand to encompass the area occupied by our concerns. And this was a lesson that President Beck had to repeat to all of us on a regular basis, and that frankly I've had to hear it throughout my life in order for its meaning really to sink in. Because what I really learned from this is that we have complete control over every facet of our life. And I do mean complete control. I am 100% responsible for everything that is in my life or not in my life. And while it was hard to accept that lesson, especially as a bunch of headstrong 19 to 25-year-olds, when we did, our effectiveness as missionaries skyrocketed. There was a complete shift in the culture of our mission, and our primary performance indicators went up by more than 600% from the time that President Beck held that first zone conference to the time that I left my mission 2 years later. And it all started with that shift in perspective. It was the first and enabling step that actually opened up the door to everything else that led to our success. And I want to provide some examples and perhaps a slightly different perspective to reinforce this better. First, a quick expansion from what President Beck taught me. Since my mission, I've realized that it's not so much that your ability to control more things that changes, but rather your ability to influence more that changes. You see, in my opinion, there's a space between what is in your direct control and what is completely outside of your control. And I refer to this as a circle of influence. So a third circle that's in the middle of the first two. The circle of influence is where we can sway an event, but we can't dictate it. And the thing about the circle of influence is that this is what is constantly shifting, expanding and contracting based on how much we focus our direct controllables. And where this is the hardest to see and realize is at the beginning of a new project, a new career or relationship, or any other new to us kind of domain of life. Because at that time, the circle of influence is the same size as our circle of control. And most people don't see that. It's especially hard to really kind of stop and consider it during that period of transition, just like it was for us as missionaries who had been in the field for a while and had to adjust to the way that President Beck was working. I've also experienced this at work. With one boss, I had earned a reputation of trust and expertise, and then had to start all over when a new one came in. And I've made the mistake of straining against that new circle of influence and acting like a hotshot, trying to influence a decision, and then getting shut down and becoming a bit of a sore loser because I hadn't really earned that influence. So what does it mean to actually focus on your circle of control? The easiest way to describe it is you're focusing on your inputs rather than results. It means being process focused and letting the results come after, because you don't have complete control over things like how fast you're going to lose weight, but you do have complete control over what you eat, how much you eat, how often you exercise, what kind of exercise you're doing, and then of course the time of day that you're eating. Again, you don't have complete control over how many sales you'll get, but you do have complete control over how many sales calls you can make, how much time you spend training and practicing your presentation, and your emotions while you're working with clients. That list of examples can go on, but it's actually normally right about now that I start to hear some kind of objection to the effect of, well, that's easy for you to say, Craig, but in my circumstances, I'm dealing with blank, and that prevents me from having control over X. And I want to be careful here because there is truth in the facts of our circumstances. Things are the way they are, but I also want to make it clear that your current location has little to do with the direction of your life. Some people are dealt a tough hand to play. It's true, especially as it pertains to their upbringing. But the fact remains that if you're watching this video, you have access to YouTube, which means you probably have access to a smartphone, or at the very least the internet, plus some flexible time to be able to watch this video, which means that you have everything you need, the information and the freedom of time to be able to change your circumstances and start by changing the direction of your life. I am not saying it won't be hard or that there won't be sacrifices involved, but you are in complete control of what you do next, and as a result, what direction your life takes. Your path might have a steeper uphill climb than someone else's, but what bearing does someone else's journey have to do with yours? None. You might have to go slower than someone else, but other people have nothing to do with your circle of control. And that's the point. It's not about what other people or your past. The circle of control is all about you and what you have direct control over. It's still on you to show up and to get started. And as you focus on it, your influence will expand and your capacity to accomplish more will along with it. And what you'll realize is that when you start to achieve your goal, you'll become a stronger person for having had a steeper climb. Athletes who train in the mountains know how to run uphill and work with less air than those who trained at sea level. And athletes who train in the swamplands of Florida know how to manage the humidity, the heat exhaustion, and as a result can go for longer than those who trained in moderate climates. Look, we all have different versions of hard, so don't victimize yourself just because your hard is different from someone else's. Over-identifying with your starting point handicaps you, not those that you're comparing yourself to. So please stop using that 2x4 as a weapon and instead use it as leverage to move that boulder in front of you, because every situation has advantages and disadvantages. Yeah, you might not have any friends right now or people to support you. That can be a good thing. More time for you to focus on the tasks that will make a difference and get yourself into a better environment. Look, I get it. It's humbling and it's hard to accept full responsibility for your life, but it is also very enabling, because when you accept control for every element of your life, everything that's in it or not in it, a sense of peace and hope comes with that. It means that there's something that you can do right now to move forward to your desired destination. Then, as you focus on your circle of control, not only does your influence expand, but so does your peace. And the best result of all of this is as you master your focus onto your circle of control, your mindset strength, your emotional intelligence, and perspective on life expand, and you begin to be able to take on greater obstacles and climb higher mountains. Then your mindset becomes like the fire that Marcus Aurelius talked about in his book Meditations, where the log that would have overwhelmed and extinguished an ember becomes the fuel for the blaze that takes on the next big thing. I started this video by talking about those emotions that have the most destructive impact on our lives, and that can really manipulate our perception to the point where we react and lash out, or shut everything and everyone else out in our lives. And frankly, I've made those mistakes. I am not perfect, but I've also learned from them. And I'm here to say that those past experiences don't define you, and you have the opportunity to start again by pausing, taking stock of your situation, your goals, and defining clear objectives based on what you have direct control over rather than a desired outcome. So, do you feel like you've been robbed of a result that you've worked for? Do you actually have the opportunity to let go, practice gratitude for what you do have, and remember how far you've come? If you're pissed at someone beyond all reason, you have the power to let go and practice forgiveness. Now, I do want to throw in the caveat here that extending forgiveness can be done from the quiet of your own heart and does not require establishing contact or opening up communication in a dangerous relationship. You can let that go. But what I do want to point out is that that peace of mind is up to you. You can let go, you can forgive, you can express gratitude, you can move forward. Because if you put your happiness on someone else or on an outside circumstance, you are actually opening yourself up to true manipulation. A favorite quote of mine that I learned this from comes from Epictetus, who said, "Who is your master? Anyone who has control over things which you have set your heart, or over things which you seek to avoid." I love this because it teaches plainly that when you set your heart on stuff that's outside of your control, you are really setting yourself up for misery and manipulation. And so if you are actually looking for a way to guarantee that you start to hit your goals, check out this video.